Hi all! Everything in my video is pulled from the public domain, and I am using them under the Fair Use, Fair Dealings guidelines. Everything I say is my own opinion. You should look into this information for yourselves, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Good morning, guys. Well, once again, we have a few small stories, and then we have some more inconsistencies that have shown up. I'm telling you, it's a never-ending saga. So let's just jump in with both feet and get there, shall we? Let's go. To start with, Charles and Camilla were spotted Sunday morning at church. I don't know what to say except I'm glad that he's going to church because he's probably praying at this point for Harry's soul, which he sold. All right, moving on. The King awards a gold medal for poetry every year, and for the year 2022, it was given to Selima Hill. Now, this was established by King George V in 1933. I think it's wonderful. Congratulations, Selma. Let me tell you something now. Harry said in his book that on multiple occasions, palace officials briefed him in order to protect William, given his role as the future king. So since George is going to be king one day, Harry says he's afraid of what will happen to Charlotte and Louis, and they'll end up with the same treatment as him. Well, let me tell you, William basically told him, you don't need to concern yourself with my children. And I agree. The Wales's children, as they're now known, are being brought up beautifully. They're being brought up with family and cousins. They're being given a normal life. They go around. They do trick-or-treating. I'd like to add that William and Catherine didn't sell their children's pictures to the highest bidder to sell a book. So before he's concerned about William's children, he might want to, look back at his own. I totally agree with this Twitter user. William's children are none of Harry's business, and this is becoming sinister and controlling, and Harry sounds like he's the head of a cult. He really does. And I completely agree with according to Taz. The alcohol-swigging, mushroom-taking, weed-smoking Harry should be more concerned with his own children, who we can only presume are being brought up in a very bitter and toxic environment. Listen, they didn't take the Earl of Dumbarton title because they were worried about their child being bullied. But what do you think is going to happen to Charlotte when it got out that she cried when she tried on that dress? Exactly. Now, in the meantime, Jimmy Kimmel and other night hosts are taking the piss out of Harry, saying that he really gave a little bit more detail than he should have, and I happen to agree with that. Do you guys know that in the book, it was shown that Harry referred to his private parts by 3 different names over 15 times? No, I'm not kidding. And Jimmy Kimmel pointed out that the next book, there should be more distance between the words mummy and penis, which I completely agree with. Now, this article showed up in the newspaper, and I found it interesting because what this man says is that his father lived in Notting Cottage for 10 years, and he was 6'4", and he was quite comfortable there. Apparently, he worked for the royal family for about 40 years. All right, moving on. Harry is demanding an apology. He says, you know what you did. You know, and I know that you know, and you've been called out, and you need to apologize. Now, this is what's so crazy. This man actually thinks the royal family is going to apologize. There's something wrong with him, okay? They are not going to apologize. It's not going to happen. You're the one who's attacked the family repeatedly. And now reports are coming out that Harry and Meghan are going to stop the attacks, and there's going to be a path to reconciliation, and they're going to get back together. And for me, that shows just how delusional he is. Do you really think you can attack your family, write a book like this, say the things that you've said, hurt them, and then expect them to just forgive you and move on? Right? And now the articles are coming out. Is Harry blackmailing his family? Personally, I think he is, because after all, he's let them know he has enough material for another book. I completely agree with this Twitter user. It's a veiled threat, and they need to take it seriously. I mean, there has to be an end point to all of this. I think the royal family is the one who's going to have to end it. Next up, Harry missed 32 calls from the royal family when Prince Philip died. What does that tell you? He says, I woke up to realize I had missed all these calls, and then I spoke to my grandmother and she broke the news to me. No, I think you were ignoring their phone calls because the Oprah interview had taken place. And of course, he takes that opportunity and he draws parallels between his grandfather and his mother, Diana. What else is he going to do? He throws Diana into everything. Next up, the story is coming out that Harry and Meghan had a plot to be part of the super rich Hollywood elite. Let me tell you something. Hollywood is not going to have anything to do with them. That's over. And now the articles are coming out that Harry actually put palace layouts in the book. He put in Queen Elizabeth's bedroom location at Balmoral, the precise location of how to get to the king's private sitting room at Clarence House from the entrance of the home, the exact amount of stairs. I mean, it's a nightmare. Moving on, it's also being reported that Catherine is really just not worried about what Harry wrote in the book. They're moving on. They're doing what they do. And the public there adores them. And Harry and Meghan have tanked in the polls. All right. Now, next up, it came out that a British lawyer has been hired to try to mediate. You know, the lawsuit is coming up with Samantha Markle. Meghan tried to have the suit dismissed, and that failed. So now she's trying to settle it before court because, let's face it, everything's going to come out in court. Personally, I pray that Samantha takes it all the way. All right, next up, one of the people that was there in Afghanistan with Harry put this up on TikTok. You can see the username on the top left there. Freeze it, read it. This sounds more believable. Next up, we have some book reviews. The Duke of Sussex says he and his wife were forced out of the royal palace by a palace jealous of Meghan's popularity. But what he gives us in spare is a first-hand account of just how envious they apparently were of William and Catherine. This person wrote, The Spare by Harry Windsor seems to be less a raw autobiography and a more carefully cultivated expose of bad decision-making, including the choice to write it. I agree. I think this one nails it right on the head. You know who humiliates someone, treats them bad, tries to make them look bad, and then tells them they're doing it for their own good to help them? This is textbook clear abuse. If only you hadn't made me do this to you. This one is amazing. Harry spent 25 years in trauma over the death of his mother, and yet killing 25 people, those that probably also have their own children, is just chess. Now selling it for money. The lack of any personal perspective is astounding. I agree. This comment was interesting. When Meghan was suicidal and they were trapped at Frogmore and couldn't find any way to get Meghan help, they did an interview so they could get a reporter to Frogmore, but not a doctor. Interesting. Next up, all I'm going to say about this article is I agree. He has been a privileged, pampered, you know what. And this article was a good one. Young men like me deserve better role models than Prince Harry. I completely agree with you. He is not a role model. Generations of young men are looking for heroes wherever they can find them. But there is no hero to be found in the story of Prince Harry, just a victim. Now, we're almost to the main story, but I had to look at this. Richard Eden put up a tweet asking if it was true that Meghan was not really liked by Americans. Yes, it is true. Americans have the same problems: unemployment, COVID, money issues. Nobody's worried about some overspoiled millionaires living in a huge mansion who try to tell us how to live our lives. Nope, people are not liking them. All right, you guys, here we go. We've already discussed several things in the book that were wrong. There's a few more inaccuracies, if you can just imagine that. So let's just see what we can cover, shall we? All right, first we have the Eaton story where he claimed that Eaton was founded by his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, which come to find out he didn't, because that king's son died as a teenager with no children. He also told some of his readers that Queen Victoria was shot at 8 times on 8 separate occasions by 7 different subjects, which is also untrue. She was only shot at 3 times, and the other 4 occasions, weapons pointed at her were unloaded or failed to fire. We already heard about the blunder about the PlayStation. We've already heard about the blunder about the TK Maxx annual sale, which they don't have. So let's move on to this one. Harry told everybody that on the day he was born, his father said to Diana, "Wonderful, now you're giving me an heir and a spare." But that's not what his mother said. According to Diana, he leaned over, looked at the baby and said, "Oh, it's a boy, and he's even got rusty-colored hair." And then he left to go play polo. Next up, he says that on his way home to Balmoral, it was suggested that they stop because people were there and they'd begun to leave things. So he said, "We pulled over and I stepped out and all I could hear was the clicking of cameras." A very moving scene, except it didn't happen. After the church service at Balmoral, the royal cars went without stopping at the gates and they did not come out until 4 days later to look at the tributes. Next up, he said that his first meeting with Camilla was over tea at Highgrove, but in real life, the meeting took place at St. James Palace, followed by a lunch at York House, which is a wing of the royal residence where Charles and his 2 boys were then living, not Highgrove. We all know about how he messed up on the Queen Mother's death and, all that information, but what about the level cheating scandal? Where he was accused of a teacher doing his work. And he says, "I did the work, I didn't cheat." And he says the palace wouldn't let him put out a statement. The palace stuck fast to the story motto, "Never complain, never explain." But that was incorrect. A statement was put out which strenuously denied the claims, circulated by Clarence House on the day the story broke, and said it is not true Harry cheated. Now, moving forward, Harry was going into the army, but he hurt his knee, and so the newspaper started pushing a story that he was afraid to go into the army, and he was bunking off using a fake knee injury, and they called him a coward. However, the newspaper was unable to find a single newspaper article covering the affair which contained the words fake or bunking off or coward. And there was no article anywhere that anybody could find that said that he was afraid to enlist. Recollections may vary. Next up, Harry claims that the Queen did not attend Charles and Camilla's wedding. But again, there's a problem because the Queen was at the wedding, she gave a speech at the reception, and she attended the service of blessing in St. George's Chapel. The only thing she didn't attend was the civil ceremony. All right, next up, Harry blames the media for the breakdown of his relationship with Cressida Bonus, which he said happened after 2 years of secret dating, and he invited her to the Wembley Arena in March of 2014. As a matter of fact, they had been a couple in the public since July of 2012, and while they were intruded upon, it did not suddenly commence in 2014, so that could not have been responsible for their split. Next up, you have Carolyn Flack, that he claimed was driven to suicide by the abuse at the hands of the press year after year. But an inquest concluded that she had struggled with depression for several years, and she decided to, hurt herself after learning that she was going to be part of some criminal proceedings. Now we know about how he messed up on what Meghan was supposedly wearing on the first date, but how about Shop's newspapers that weren't on sale? When Meghan was in London in 2016, after their relationship became public, she apparently walked from the palace to a nearby branch of Whole Foods to go shopping. And Harry said while she was queuing at the checkouts, there were rows and rows of magazines and newspapers, and all of them had shocking and disgusting headlines, and it was about her, and people noticed her, and they pulled out their phones like zombies, and they were making faces behind her back. Problem is, on the day in question, which was November 10th, Meghan was not on the front page of any magazines. And even if she would have been, it wouldn't have been at Whole Foods because they don't sell newspapers. They only sell magazines that are specialist lifestyle publications. Oops. Even the corgis. Harry said that all the corgis that the Queen owned were all said to descend from the corgis that belonged to Queen Victoria. Very nice. And while Victoria had more than 100 dogs in her lifetime, 28 breeds, not one of them was a corgi. Harry was talking how the Queen had sent the Duke and Duchess of Windsor to a remote corner of the burial ground. one last final exile. But that's not true. On the day of the Duchess of Windsor's funeral, she ordered flags to fly at half-mast on public buildings as a mark of respect to the former Wallis Simpson. And when Harry himself was asked where he might want to be buried, before he went off to Afghanistan, he said that an aide asked him to choose a spot, and he said the royal vault at Windsor where Grandpa was being settled at the moment, and he was told that the vault was full and he couldn't go there. Next up are the Thomas Markle photos. Now, Harry said, first Meghan said it in her Oprah interview, then Harry said that the pictures were taken and the publication of them was delayed for maximum, impact, to inflict maximum damage, even though the pictures had been taken weeks earlier. Once again, that was proven to be not true. The pictures were taken May 12th and they were published within 24 hours. Now, this book doubles down on the debunked claim that the Archbishop of Canterbury had a wedding ceremony with Harry and Meghan in their backyard. It was just a small ceremony. Now, Harry says in the book it was a small ceremony, just the two of us, Guy and Pula, which are their dogs. Unofficial, non-binding, except in our souls. So while Harry's description is probably more accurate than Meghan's because she flat out said they got married, it's also at odds again with Lambeth Palace's view that the Archbishop was merely doing a rehearsal, which is normal. It should also be noticed that he barely touched on Meghan's lawsuit. It was one of the biggest news stories, but Harry basically didn't touch it at all. Zeroing in towards the end here, let's not forget the U-turn over the racism claim where Meghan said that there had been multiple conversations. And when Oprah said, because there were concerns that if he were too brown, that would be a problem, are you saying that? And Meghan responded, if that's the assumption you're making, I think that's a pretty safe one. There you go. But now, of course, now they're claiming they never said that at all. Give me a break. I have to tell you, this book should not be selling as a nonfiction because it's pretty obvious that even the simplest things that could have been Googled and double-checked, just nobody bothered. It's just crazy. No, I saw this on Twitter. There's been some fake stuff put up, but I saw this on Twitter, and all I can say is, if this is true, it's scary. I completely agree that Prince Harry probably needs a psych hold. What it's saying is that he wrote in the Spare that at the 2020 Sandringham Summit, when the royal family met to discuss him and Meghan departing, that Princess Diana spoke to him through a tree and told him he should be king instead of William. All right, guys, palate cleanser time. Finn was sleeping, and so I grabbed some video of him. I think he was dreaming about running on the land. I just wish all dogs slept like this. Watch this. Are you awake? Good morning. This was sent to me by one of my subscribers. Scary. All right, leave those comments below. Don't forget to double check the subscribe button if you've already hit it. If you haven't hit it, hit it. And if you've already hit it, double check and make sure you're still subscribed, okay? Don't forget to go up into the description box. You'll find my Twitter, my Getter, my Rumble, my Patreon. Don't forget the link to my coffee fund. All money donated this month goes to our fundraiser. Any money sent through the thanks button comes to me. I hope you all have a great day.